Transition Radio TV, brought to you by NOTSTR8. They have everything you could possibly need for your cross-dressing and transgender needs. Visit their website at www.thebreastformstore.com and tell them Transition Radio sent you.
The following ingredients include a look behind the scenes. Cook uncovered until hot. Add grooves to taste.
I would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Once upon a time, there was a little girl.
The accident was over a year ago. A second woman has been elected president. A 12th planet has been named in the solar system. The last wild polar bear has died. I slept through it all. I was here for my waking. He called it a beginning. He said it was good. I think he may have thought that anything I did was good.
Welcome to Transition Radio, live from Wilton Manors, Florida, with your host, Mark Angelo Cummings.
A show for trans folks, by trans folks, here to let your voice be heard.
Well, good evening, and welcome to another edition of Transition Radio TV. Thursday night, Trans Night, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Tuesdays the radio show, Thursdays the TV show, and I want to thank you for joining us again. Tonight, we have the producer of Trans, the movie, Dr. Mark Schoen, directed by Chris Arnold. Trans is a featured documentary scheduled for exclusive releases in selected festivals and markets. Trans is an up-close and very personal journey into the transgender world through the memorable stories of the unusual lives of a remarkable cast of characters. It begins with the story of Lieutenant Commander Christopher McGee, a Navy flight surgeon selected by NASA to serve on 2 space missions. But upon her discharge from the armed forces, Chris McGee would set out upon a different mission from which she was never to return. Now, Dr. Christine McGee is able to tell her own amazing story, picked up by the media on both MSNBC and Oprah Winfrey's show, and provide an entrance into a complex and dramatic world that is trans. Dr. Schoen, the producer, also promotes sexual literacy through sex-smart films.
Transgender. And there were a lot of people who were transgender before me. A lot of people.
About 4 years old, she talked about cutting off her penis, and that concerned me a lot.
And she said, "Mom, I am not in the right body, but I am supposed to be a girl."
What? He's what?
You know, like for you and for other people, gender, it's this thing that you don't talk about. It's just like, you know, you wake up, you know you're a girl, that's it. For me, it was like harder.
Everybody was shocked, even my mother, because I just wasn't an effeminate guy.
I felt that I was alone. I lived about half of my life as somebody who was born female in this world.
And I see her coming out of the darkness from the parking lot. I had to catch my breath because she was just gorgeous. You know, she's tall, blonde, blue eyes.
That was something, a no-brainer. I definitely was going to save sperm.
If you could raise your hands if someone you know, including yourself, has ever been sexually assaulted or experienced any kind of sexual violence. Please take a look around.
Transgender people face injustice at every turn of their lives.
2 unidentified transgender people were found tortured and burned.
Horrid things happen to us. We don't make it up.
41% of them have attempted suicide.
I've always fixed everything for my family, and I can't fix this.
I don't want to ever be a boy again.
I no longer have a son. I now have a daughter.
Another young person got shot, and she was trans, so big deal.
We need to own the hope that we want to see in the world and show the world that we are here.
I get to meet some of the bravest people I've ever met in my life because they're willing to confront the fact that they could potentially lose everything to be true to themselves.
It's okay to be different.
And now welcome to my show, Dr. Mark Schoen.
Thank you, Mark. Good to be here.
Thank you so much for making this film. Looking back at this clip and seeing Jameson Green, which was one of the first individual that I saw when I was doing research, when I found out there was such a thing as being transgender. And I didn't transition until I was 38 years old and really didn't hear much about this. So it almost like brings tears to my eyes to see how far we have come in this movement, in this great knowledge-based movement that we're doing to help those young individuals not have to suffer and have to go through their entire life and wait till they're 38, 39 years old to transition. So I thank you so much for putting this film out there, and I'm sure many, many parents are thanking you as well.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey with this film, and what I've learned in the last 4 years, 3 of which we were in production, is the trans community is getting younger. That more people are feeling more comfortable to come out and be their authentic selves. And every time I have a screening, I learn something. And I've had 30 college screenings, a dozen church screenings, support group screenings in the last year. And every time I attend one, I learn something.
I don't know if you're familiar with Jazz, first 5-year-old who started kindergarten, who was born biologically.
I met Jazz a few weeks ago at the Philadelphia Trans Health Conference.
Yes, Jeanette when I went to do the Maury Povich show, she actually reached out to me. She was very much fearful and started communicating with me, and because Jazz was like one of the first real known, and she really had hope, you know, when she saw an older transgender individual and that there is life, that you can go on, that you can lead a normal life. And thanks to Jazz, many other parents have come out and many other trans kids are able to express themselves and not be as fearful. So it's like growing in leaps and bounds, and it's an amazing thing because humanity needs to realize that there's an evolution taking place, and instead of being so judgmental against each other and against what they think is different, they should look at this as something beautiful, that Mother Nature is speaking out and is breaking away from these gender roles and these barriers. And I believe that all this is happening for a reason.
Yeah, I think, this film, if you ask me who the film was made for, the film was made really for the mainstream audience. And the hope was that it would educate the mainstream. Well, to be quite frank, the mainstream has rejected this film. It's been embraced by the academic world, universities. I had a high school screening recently, which was amazing to hear high school kids asking all sorts of great questions and trying to understand. Churches have started to embrace it. I had one experience about 3 months ago. I was at a church, and people walked in with a 10-year-old child. And when I saw this 10-year-old, I thought, what is she doing here? And she sat through the film. She sat through an hour of Q&A, And then she walked right up to me with a little piece of paper and said, "Could you sign this piece of paper?" And I said, "Why do you want me to sign this piece of paper?" And she said, "Well, my dad is trans, and I learned a lot from this film." And I said to her, "Can we sit and talk for a few minutes?" And I sat down with this 10-year-old girl, and let me tell you, she taught me something. She knew she loved her dad, but she knew he was different. And she said, by watching this film, it helped me understand my dad. Wow. And so I had to rethink my opinion about age. And I was so glad this little girl saw this film. So
it's amazing. We think that children are judgmental, and they're not. It's what they learn through their parents. And it's my hope that this old school, this old way of thinking just kind of gets lost in the dark somewhere, and that people will start opening up their hearts and mind more and start to be more understanding and loving. And there's a lot of trans individuals that have lost their family because of this ignorance. And yes. I believe films like the movie that you just made, Trans the Movie, is going to really help a lot. Let me ask you, Mark, what was the inspiration behind this documentary? Why did you all of a sudden become interested in?
Well, you know, I've been doing films, instructional and documentary films for many years, and I've made over 50 films. And I was serving on the National Advisory Council for Sexual Health. And that's at Morehouse School of Medicine in Atlanta. And there were 16 of us on that council. And one of them was a transgender surgeon named Dr. Christine McGinn. And one day she came up to me and said, "There's a company that wants to make a film about me." And I said, "Great. You know, you have a fantastic story. I thought it would be a great film." And she said, "I don't want them to make it." And I said, "Why not?" She said, "I researched this company. If they make it, it'll be like an episode of the Jerry Springer Show." She said, "Would you like to do it?" And that began a 3-year journey.
Wow.
So that's how it started.
So you were chosen, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, and 2 of us actually made the film, and we worked for 3 years. It's one of the lowest budgets I've ever had to work with, but I can honestly say it's the most important film I've made. You know, I've made lots of films that help people with feel more comfortable about their sexuality. I have lots of films that help people with sexual issues. This film saves lives, and I'm very proud to have been a part of it.
Definitely. Tell us a little bit about how the cast got selected. What was the process?
It was a very interesting process. Well, Dr. McGinn actually was first, and she made it very clear she didn't want this to be the Dr. McGinn story. She said, "Use my story as a window to get into the transgender community." So there's one trans boy named Chris, and a friend of mine was teaching a human sexuality course in California, and Chris was taking this course, and at the time Chris was identifying as a lesbian. And she's doing the unit on gender identity, and a light went off in Chris's head, and he said, "That's me." And he went up to the professor and said, "What you described is me. That's who I am." And she talked to him a little while, and she said, "You know, my friend's making a film on this subject. Would you like to talk to him?" Well, at the time, Chris was still cutting himself, and he was doing some terrible things to himself. And we met with him, we met with his family, we interviewed him, we interviewed his family. And then I said, "How would you like to go to the Philadelphia Trans Health Conference for a few days?" And we flew. I was living in California at the time. We all flew to Philadelphia. And Chris spent 3 days in Philadelphia that changed his life. We introduced him to Jameson Green. I would call him on his cell phone. I said, we're going out to lunch. And he said, no, there's another meeting at noon. I want to go. He was at meetings all day long. And it was a life-changing experience for Chris. So, and I'm still in touch with him, and it's great. He's a great young man.
And that's really great that the younger trans generation have all these vehicles for them, making them feel more connected, making them feel better about themselves, versus a lot of us who didn't have this or didn't even know that there was such a thing. Our parents weren't as accepting. We were ridiculed. And it's such a wonderful evolution how, even though we still have a lot of negativity, a lot of judgment out there, but there is a lot more doors opening for acceptance and education. And you mentioned that the actual big screen didn't want anything to do with the actual film. Did they give you any reasons why, or was it like run around?
You know, the first year a film is out, you enter it into film festivals. And we entered it into a lot of film festivals. And the mainstream film festivals rejected us. The Tribeca Film Festival, we were one of the last films they rejected. And there's a whole story behind that. But had we got into that film festival, it would have made a big difference for us. But unfortunately, we didn't. We've been in lots of LGBT film festivals. We've got 5 or 6 Best Documentary Awards from these film festivals. I've been to 30 colleges in the last year, and the screenings are emotional. You know, yesterday I was in St. Louis at Washington University. We had a screening there, and people are crying, people are laughing, and the discussion following it is always emotional. We had parents of transgender children at the screening, and it's really amazing, you know, to hear a parent say, what are you doing with your child and how are you dealing with it? And the mother is saying, I'm just listening to what my child is saying. My child knows what I should do, and he's telling me. And she's talking about a 7-year-old. So basically she was saying, there's nothing wrong with my child. I just have to learn how to deal with it. So it's really
and adults
satisfying.
really need to take a lesson from children, because children are very innocent and they speak from their heart and they haven't been tainted. So we could really learn a lot from children. So when you see a 5-year-old, even a 3-year-old that says, I was born biologically a male, and says, no, I'm a female, there's no malice in that. There's not a choice. There's no sexual preference. It's how they're feeling inside, and we need to really listen to that.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, how has the reception been in general? I know that the main media hasn't really accepted, or the main movie, whatever you want to call it, hasn't really accepted. But in general, how has the reception been? You deal a lot with the LGBT community.
Well, the reception has been just I wish you could be a fly on the wall at one of our screenings. You know, there are people who can't attend the screening and they'll just go online and buy a DVD. And then after they screen it, they'll write something on our Facebook page. One person wrote, person was about 20 years old, a trans woman, and hadn't come out to her mother. She said, I ordered the DVD. My mom and I sit down and watched it. We cried, and then we hugged. And I think, what more can you ask? You know, that this young person used the film to help ease the coming out process to her mom.
Which is a great tool. And
yeah.
Indeed. I mean, what better way than to show something that's going to be that eye-opening as a form of education, instead of just saying, hi, I'm trans, and the parent's not going to understand what that means, and all of a sudden they get all these predisposed thoughts in their heads. With this film, it breaks it down, and it sees other people that are dealing with the issue as well. So it's a definitely a great tool.
Yeah, one of the biggest compliments we received was a WPATH member. Are you familiar with WPATH? The World Professional Association of Transgender Health. Wrote on their listserv, "We finally have a tool." So, I was flattered that that was said.
And that must feel really good inside to know that you've created something that's going to help millions and is going to be used as a tool.
It's, the film touches lives. And, I feel privileged to be able to witness that. And, and the people who appear in the film, we stay in touch, and every once in a while I'll do a screening, and if I'm doing a screening in their neck of the woods, they'll show up and participate in the Q&A.
And something like this would probably be really, really good in areas that don't have a very big LGBT community or don't have any resource whatsoever. Showing this film is going to be like heaven sent for them, and it's going to really help educate the small communities out there, a lot of backwoods type of places. So I'm sure as time progresses, more and more people would want to bring the film, whether it's to their churches, schools, and it's going to really help open up a lot of doors.
Yeah, a lot of people have created this, the screen. It's interesting that most of the screenings at the universities are organized by the LGBT student group on campus. And I'll get contacted by a student, and usually with the aid of a faculty member, they organize the screening. And I've had screenings where there are 250 people in the audience.
Wow.
So we did a screening in Pittsburgh, and the Andy Warhol Museum donated their theater to the trans group in Pittsburgh, and we packed the theater.
That's amazing.
And it was so cool, to be in the Andy Warhol Museum and then just having my film shown there.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you think we're making headway on this topic? I know 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it was a major taboo. You think because of films like your film and other documentaries and books and people being more visible, do you think we're making headway?
I think we're making headway, but when someone says to me, what is this film about? I say it's about human rights, it's about discrimination, it's about injustice. And look at other areas. Look, in the 1960s, we had a civil rights movement. There was a leader. There was Martin Luther King. There were countless demonstrations and marches that we all knew about. We had the gay rights movement. We had Harvey Milk. We had countless demonstrations and events. We had the women's movement. We had Gloria Steinem, Betty Friedan, and there were all sorts of marches and events. With the transgender community, there's no Martin Luther King. And it frustrates me that why can't this be organized? I feel like the transgender community is behind these other groups by many years. And I don't, is it because many people want to remain invisible? Why can't we get this out there more?
Unfortunately, you hit the nail on the head. A lot of people, when they first start out, they want to know all this information. They're very humble. They finally transition. They're looking like the gender that they're trying to transition to. And then they say, okay, goodbye, good luck. You're on your own. I'm going stealth. I don't want to judge anybody, but I believe that the more people are visible, the less people become stealth. And the more we unite, the bigger the movement we're going to have.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of argument and disconnect between the transgender community. And they become almost like the elitists. They judge, well, if you're not taking hormones, then you're not considered transgender. Or if you don't have full sex reassignment surgery, you're not transgender either. And I believe that's one of the reasons why we don't have a union. People need to unite, forget their differences. Not two transgender are the same, But you know what? We all have the same heart, and we all have been ridiculed because we feel our brain and our genitals don't match.
I agree with you 100%. And, you know, I think we need to start looking at gender. We need to take the boxes away.
Yes.
You know, we need to look at it on a spectrum. And the spectrum is very wide. And where I fall on the spectrum, probably no one else falls in that same spot. And, you know, we're so hung up on labels. And, you know, and we have to get over that.
Exactly.
You know, whether you're taking hormones, whether you had surgery, or don't want surgery, or want surgery, or, you know, if you identify yourself as trans, what difference does it make? I mean, I remember back in the 60s, I'm showing my age, black friends of mine were making fun of people who had lighter skin. And I think it's the same with every minority group, that we're always looking to be superior.
And that's what keeps us apart, and that's what keeps us from actually getting bigger in numbers. And it's really sad, because the bigger we are in numbers, the more our voices will be heard and the more changes will take place, and people will take us more seriously. Right now, we're just the minority, and they think of us as freaks that want to wear dresses, or girls that want to pretend to be boys, and it's so much bigger than what humanity is probably ready for. But I believe that the more visibility we have, the more and more open hearts we'll see. And I'm hoping things will change. I'm really hopeful.
Well, I think they're changing, but changing at a slower pace than I certainly would like.
Snail speed.
Yes.
Definitely. You have a company called Sex Smart Films, and I was looking through the website, and you have tremendously interesting different types of small films that educate you on sexuality. And one of the films that I saw in this website is called Second Chance Sex Change. And I want to have the viewers look at this particular film.
I wish with all my heart that I had been born a biological female. When I first began to publicly dress as a woman, it required great bravery on my part to appear as a female in the presence of people who had known me only in maleness all of their lives. And it was a very scary thing for one day to be dressed as a male and the next day to come to work as a female. It made me stronger and braver to go through the experience of that change, because it was a terrifying thing to do. But at the end of it, my self-confidence has been boosted considerably. What am I wearing? I'm wearing a black skirt, a purple sweater, my brown boots, and that's it. I'll probably grab some kind of jacket. I have had both highs and lows. I've had some periods of loneliness and depression. I've had some wonderful experiences of friendship and companionship and acceptance. Welcome to a woman's world, my friend. They don't have my side. My daughter is incredibly supportive, very accepting. She still calls me Dad, and I'll always be her dad.
But it's just weird not to call him dad, her, still working on the pronouns. It's just weird not to call her dad in public, because I always address Terry as dad. These are the ones I bought.
I like
It's just, it is what it is. You know?
This is what my life was like before I became an honest person, before I managed to find the courage to tell the truth about myself. It was really wrapped up in hobbies. Heart problems I had in early 2006 made me realize that soon it would be too late in life to go through the transition. That led me to believe that perhaps that it would be possible and advisable to explore going through gender transition.
Terry?
Yes, good morning, how are you?
Hi, how are you? I'm Craig Meader-Keys.
Craig, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. I'm an anesthesiologist here.
I'll see you back.
I wish I didn't have to go through this procedure very much. I wish that I had had 2 X chromosomes instead of a Y chromosome, because then my life would have been a whole lot different and I wouldn't have had to endure some quite painful and expensive surgery. But notwithstanding that, I'm really, really happy that I was able to do this and fix what nature didn't do properly in my case.
Special doors.
I feel very relieved that the surgery is over and that it all went very well. And I'm looking forward to recuperating and starting my new life. I'm very, very happy that I did this. It's the best thing I ever did in my life. For myself, anyway. If I had to do it all over again, I would make the transition in a heartbeat from male to female. I feel like I live in a state of grace.
Very interesting film. You know, one of the things that I get from watching something like this and many other films is we think that being transgender, it's all about surgeries. And to me, being transgender is a feeling. It's almost like with the Native American, the two-spirited individuals who didn't have the surgeries, didn't have hormones available to them, but express themselves in the energy, because everything's about energy, yin and yang, black and white, light and day. There's that duality. And I believe that we're turning a 360, coming full circles to becoming one again as an energy source.
Yeah, it's interesting, the cross-cultural perspectives of transgender, like, you know, Hawaii, two-spirit, American Samoa. I just can't forget reading about this trans woman who plays on the men's national soccer team in American Samoa. And I remember watching a video of the goalie out of position, and this trans woman gets in front of the goal and blocks a shot. And the 10 other guys on the team, when the play stopped, ran up to this trans woman and were hugging her and, you know, embraced her. And I thought, that would never happen in our country. No. So that culture sees her as someone who is special. And it's kind of interesting. We need to start looking at other cultures and maybe learn something.
Definitely so. And back in the day, we were considered shamans and healers and looked upon some wise individual in the tribe. Nowadays, they want to stone us, kill us, murder us, and try to hide us somewhere. I don't know. It's crazy. So how did you get into film? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I got out of college, and I was a school teacher. And I was teaching health education in a New York school. And New York said that the health education programs need to include something on sexually transmitted infections. So I started teaching it, and all the questions had to do with sexuality. You know, I would say you get this disease through sexual contact. What do you mean by sexual contact? I said oral genital contact, intercourse. What does that mean? And I'm explaining about sexuality in these classes. And one day, one of the administrators said to me, "How's the class going?" And I said, "Well, if I were a parent, I wouldn't want my child learning about sexuality because of disease." And he said to me, "What do you think we should do about it?" I said, "We should start a program on sexual health." So he said, "Go for it." So I did it. New York University at the time had a program in human sexuality, so I went there, spent 4 months in Sweden studying, got a PhD in human sexuality, and I had a professor there named Derek Calderwood, who passed away, who was my mentor and encouraged me to make films. And he and I collaborated on a number of them. And we made, back in 1980, we made a film on gender. We actually made 2 films on gender. And it sort of, I left my teaching job and started making films. And then there was a company in North Carolina that produces the Better Sex video series. And they hired me to make their sex education films. And I did that for 8 years. And then I decided there were some films I wanted to make on my own. So I left and I moved to California and eventually made Trans.
Wow.
So,
and Sex Smart Films, is that all you, or is that a collaboration with other filmmakers? Or?
Well, no, Sex Smart Films is, I archive and collect, and it's all the films I've produced, but I have other films. In fact, there are 400 films on the site.
Wow. Yeah, I was perusing some of it, and a lot of very interesting films.
Yeah, and one of the things, in fact, that I just did a workshop on in at the University of Washington University in St. Louis, I have a series of, I have 150 condom commercials and public service announcements on HIV from 50 different countries. And if you look at what different countries allow broadcast on television, you know, I showed one from Switzerland and they saw some nudity and they go, "Oh, they would never allow us to show that here." You show one from Spain and they're holding up a condom and they say, "Oh, we would never show that on our television."
It's crazy. We're supposed to be such an advanced country, land of the free, home of the brave. You know, I heard that in Spain, women could go topless in the beach without no problem. Here you do that, you get arrested. It's bizarre. You know, it's like we're sexual beings. We were born naked. We should be able to expose ourselves as we see fit. It's our body. And sex should not be tagged to diseases. I think it's almost like they created these diseases to make us fearful, because when we're loving each other, we're not having war. You know, and it's like...
Well, that reminds... When I was in Sweden, I spent a week in Denmark, and I lived with a Danish family. And there's lots of nudity on Danish television. And there was a 4-year-old child, and we were sitting in the evening watching television, and nudity, no problem. All of a sudden, an American show comes on called McCloud, and a fight breaks out. The mother grabs this 4-year-old and puts her hand over his eyes. And I thought, if it was in the States, we don't care if we see someone get their head bashed in, as long as they're wearing clothes.
Yeah, that is very true.
So
what other endeavors have you been part of besides Trans and some of these Sex Smart films that you've produced?
Well, I did a documentary about a woman named Betty Dotson, who is... She refers to herself as the mother of masturbation. She's a feminist. And it's called Betty Dotson, Her Life of Sex and Art. She came to New York from Wichita, Kansas as a 19-year-old artist and made a living as a commercial artist. She also has published many books over the last 20 or 30 years. I did another documentary called XXX Marriage, and it's about a married couple who both appear in adult films. And it tells their story, how they met, how they deal with being adult film stars. And then I've made lots of instructional films that are used in universities all over the world dealing with sexuality. Most of them for this company in North Carolina that
It's
does
important to learn how to make love. Not everybody, it's not like, your parents don't teach you. No one really tells you what to do. So it's like a great thing to really learn and not to be afraid of sex and not to be afraid of your body. And it's a beautiful thing. To me, I look in the mirror and I don't have bottom surgery, but I think it's art. What I've created through the help of hormones, and of course I have mastectomy and hysterectomy, but I look at myself in the mirror and all their trans guys might say, oh no, I'm not complete. I think it's a work of art. And I think I'm happy with myself.
Well, I love hearing that. It's so refreshing to hear someone say that, because most of the people I meet, they're just constantly looking, they're unhappy with themselves and they're trying to change. So it's nice to see someone who accepts themselves.
The way I look at it, most people think that they'll find happiness if they get from point A to point B. When they get to point B, they find something else to be unhappy about. So happiness starts from within. You could have 0 surgeries, and as long as you're happy with yourself and you're proud of who you are and you express yourself the way you feel fit, then that's happiness right there. You don't have to wait to get certain surgeries to find happiness, because you might get hit by a bus tomorrow and never find that happiness. You got to live in the now and be grateful with what you have. And I think being transgender is a gift. And one of my main goals is to help my transgender brothers and sisters realize that this is a gift. It's not a burden. It's not some sort of curse. We have been blessed, and we've been given this gift to help humanity evolve. That's
I think the difficulty is not it's the way that people are treated. And I think we need to educate the general public about what transgender means, what it is, because the problems people have is not, the problem is not being transgender, it's the way they are treated. And, we have the story of teenagers committing suicide in the trans community. It's just, it's out of control. And when I meet parents who've had children who've committed suicide, it just tears me up. This shouldn't be happening in the year 2013.
I know. But I believe it starts by self-love, and if everyone walked with their heads high, and somebody that tries to bully you, you just turn around and educate them and not feel like you're less than, because I think we emit that energy and that we almost like feel the fire for the bullies to do things. If we turn it around and say, hey, I'm okay and I'm fine with being who I am. You're the one that's got the problem. And just, I don't know, it's just, to me, it's attitude in a sense. And I hear what you're saying, people bring themselves down because someone makes fun of them. And then it's hard to kind of build up your what's the word I'm looking for? Your self-esteem. Yeah, but it's almost like who came first, the chicken or the egg? And I noticed with me, I've never had any kind of hateful things from anybody because of the attitude and the way I walk with my head high. And like I said, I love myself. I don't care what you're going to tell me. I don't care how much fun you make of me. I love myself.
I think the internet is helping them, because when I talk to the older people in the film and I say, how come you waited till you were 53 to transition? And they'll say, well, when I was a kid, I thought I was the only one in the world like this. And now with the internet, it's creating community. And young people are able to go on the internet and actually communicate with people who feel the way they do. And I think that's an important thing, to have this community.
Well, here's another video from Sex Smart Films that I wanted the viewers to watch. That was pretty interesting.
My mother let it slip once. When you were born, they didn't know if you were a girl or a boy. And she giggled.
My parents were told they should just take me home, dress me in yellow and green, give me a nickname, and wait to see.
You know, it's not just male, it's not just female. I'm intersex.
Sorry, society, because it would have been so simple if it was just male and female. But you're going to have to change your mind now.
Intersex! Yeah, yeah, yeah!
Intersex isn't uncommon, it's just unheard of.
Doctors became increasingly aggressive to try to make sure that everybody looked clearly male or looked clearly female. There was this real authoritativeness about this is what we do for these children.
I had more than a dozen surgeries before I was 10.
They decided to remove my clitoris because it was too big for a normal girl.
All my parents' friends that I remembered from childhood all knew that my parents had a boy who disappeared and then they had a girl and there wasn't any explanation.
There's two entries, one that says nice wee lad and another one that says sex determined as female.
I was told to pass as a boy. I was taught to strive to be as boy-like as possible. It's absurd. I can't measure up to being male.
People treated me like a freak. They cut me up. They harmed me in ways that prevent me from being romantically or sexually intimate with people.
I'm very angry at the genitals that were taken away from me.
We have created this cycle of, oh my God, we have to fix it, shame it, hide it, and then there's another intersex birth. You've never talked about the one that might be your neighbor.
I love being intersex. I just wish they didn't fuck with my body so much, you know?
Love your kids that are different. There's lots of us that don't fit the two standard boxes.
I am different because I was born different. And you were different because you was born different.
I mean, I do cross the female box when I have to choose one, but my body isn't female.
There's more to being a man or a woman than just a genital. People have genitals. People are not genitals. I know that's hard to believe because we've all met a lot of pricks in our lives.
That's a very interesting topic in itself and a show on its own, intersex, and
It's a great film, and it's out of New Zealand, and it's just, if you want to learn about intersex, watch. It's called Intersection. It's available online. I strongly recommend it. I've seen it a couple of times, and it's an important film. And
it's incredible that in this day and age, people don't realize that there are intersex people. There are people that are born with either one testicle and ovary, with all sorts of different combination, and it's part of nature. It's what is. It's not some weirdness or anything of that nature. And how dare the doctors try to manipulate or mutilate is the word I'm actually trying to look for.
Yeah.
Somebody's
And
genital. Gender is here. It's not
fortunately, there's less of that going on, but it's still going on.
Oh, definitely.
But, you know, there's Mickey Diamond at the University of Hawaii who does a lot of research in this area. He's moving to have intersex and transgender under one umbrella because now it's sort of like there are two camps. There's the transgender camp and the intersex camp. And he is moving to make it one group that is on a spectrum, as I said earlier. And this is just another part of the spectrum.
Definitely, and I believe a lot of transgender, we are part of that intersex spectrum. It's hormonally based, depending on the hormonal washing in the brain. Let me ask you, how has it been working with trans individuals, and what have they taught you?
Well, I have been in this field since the 70s. And I remember when I was in graduate school, I went to Johns Hopkins University and spent a couple of days with Dr. John Money. So I've been doing this for a long time. I want you to know I learned more about gender in the last 3 years making this film than I had in the previous 30 years. And I learned from talking to trans individuals and their families. And I keep learning. And every time I have a screening and I talk to someone, I learn. And I think we've got to be open to listening to people's stories and hearing what they have to say and how they feel. I was at a screening at Eastern Michigan University about 6 months ago, and a young trans guy came up to me after, basically told me he didn't have many people to talk to, and we exchanged contact information and we corresponded, talked on Facebook. And anyway, this person who happened to be Japanese, at one point I said, well, what about your family? And there was this long silence. His family, his immediate and extended family, which consisted of 38 people, were all wiped out in the tsunami. And when I heard this, I didn't know what to say. And we kept in touch. And if you remember that trans boy I said who was in the film, Chris, I told Chris this story. And Chris reached out to this person. And they've become friends and stay in touch. So I think the importance of community
definitely
is, a real strong factor in helping people become more comfortable with themselves.
Definitely. And that's what we're missing in the trans community. There's just fragments all over the place, and that needs to stop. Can you tell our viewers where they can purchase the movie?
We have a website called transthemovie.com, and you can purchase a DVD there, and we ship the DVDs practically the day we get the order. And we've actually shipped we don't advertise, we just have this website, transthemovie.com, and I've shipped DVDs to over 30 countries. And I still wonder, how do they find out about it?
Word of mouth. It's amazing. When I
Yeah,
started posting the show all over different places, a lot of people gave me feedback. Oh yeah, I loved the film, watched it, so a lot of people have watched it, and it's a great film.
Well, thank you. It was a real satisfying experience to be part of that film. And one of the first thing I say after a screening is, I have to thank every person who got in front of our camera, because for every person you see on the screen, there were probably 10 people we asked who said no, and said no for good reason. They hadn't come out to their family, they feared discrimination at work or school, so they feared for their safety. So I'm eternally indebted to the people who got in front of our cameras.
Great job. Well, thank you so much for being part of the show, and can't thank you enough. And I'm sure that the viewers enjoyed it, and those that miss it live will be able to watch it on demand, and I'll be sending you the link to the show so you can watch it.
Mark, thank you so much. I appreciate your support and your passion for this subject.
Thank you.
Okay, good night.
I honor you. Thank you. Good night. In the trans news, a transgender woman by the name of Adina Menji from Brooklyn, New York, reached out recently about her housing situation and desired to continue her transition while living in transitional housing run by Free at Last 2 Incorporated. She had been accepted by her roommates and neighbors since coming out as transgender in November of 2012. Her landlord was less than accepting, though, and in recent months he began to harass her about living at the residence. Fred Assam Fowl, last name Sooting, who is her landlord and owner of Free at Last 2 Incorporated, demanded that Mrs. Menji leave her residence within 8 days or face being put out on the street. He wrote a very discriminatory letter to her on July 23rd, which begins by reading, "Based on your decision to acknowledge yourself as a woman, you are being referred to a more suitable residence." A couple of days after Ms. Menji went to SRLP, she was threatened by Mr. Fowl and told that she would possibly face physical danger from him for seeking an attorney. Mr. Fowl became extremely enraged and began describing a past tenant that he forced out after the tenant sought to protect his legal rights. Ms. Menji began fearing for her safety as she is physically unable to move her items out of her residency and would prefer to stay at her current place of residence, where she has resided for the previous 5 years, until a stable housing alternative can be obtained. During a half-hour interview with Mr. Fowl, he told the actual press that he was looking for a place for Miss Menji to go. He said, I call the GBLG Center, meaning LGBT Center, you know, the type of place for those type of individuals. They told me they have spaces for him, a bed, and they would take him and get him the counseling that he needs for his problem. When he was asked, was he talking about the LGBT Center on West 13th Street, he said, yes, that is the place. They told me they would take him in and have a special area for gentlemen like him. And towards the end of the interview, Mr. Fowl kind of changed his tune a little bit. He says, you know, I run a place for thugs, people that just got out of jail. They're also sexual predators. I'm not going to bring that into this place, while referring to Mr. Menji as a transgender. Mr. Fowl has agreed to give Ms. Menji at least 2 more weeks to reside at the residence and says he will refer her to a shelter if she continues to stay beyond that date. Mr. Fowl also acknowledged that he was using the incorrect pronouns throughout the interview and fully understands that the correct way to refer to a transgender woman is by using the correct pronouns, she, her, and hers. He says he will be back in contact with the ETNYC as things progress. Everything Trans New York City contacted Mary Steyer, a representative from the LGBT Center, and she says, we do not have any type of shelter here to provide. We can only make referrals. That's pretty sad. Well, you decided to transition. What will be the first thing you will do? Who will you turn out to be? Will your beard grow? Will you see chest hair? How much muscle will you get? Who will love you? And will there be any regrets? The sun will soon start shining. Your life will be outstanding. No more lines. No more tears. Life is now on the up, and soon the gray will disappear. And now, for the transition video of the week by Caleb Talarico, something like that. Thank you for that video. Next week we got Philip Jim Bob. He is a suicide survivor. Jim tried burning himself, and that's Tuesday on the radio show. I'm going to have him, and we're also working on having him on the TV show later on when he gets some videos made up. And on Thursday we've got Georgie Jessup, and Georgie's a musician, two-spirited, MTF, amazing soul. I've had Skype conversations with her, has a slew of albums that she has produced, and you'll definitely enjoy that show. I want to thank you all. I want to thank Mark for being on the show today. Thank you, Joe, for the great job you always do. I know you have been feeling a little boo-booish and under the weather, and thank you for being here and always on top. Thank you so much, everybody. I love you. But remember to always love yourselves, too. Good night.